Hello and welcome to the third episode of Ancient Warfare Answers, our new series of very short videos in which we try to answer one particular question real quick in 5 to 10 minutes. With me today is Murray Dom, the assistant editor of Ancient Warfare, and I'm Jasper, and I'm the editor of the magazine. And question today is Greek, so it goes to Murray, and it is yeah, well, that's how we sort of divided them, at least for now. The question is, Murray, what can you tell me about the organization of the Athenian army?
Oh, what a good question. Because, of course, there's so much focus given to the Spartans and the ancient Spartan army. And, of course, we know a lot about the ancient Spartan army, written by Athenians on the most part. And the bizarre thing is that they seem to have neglected telling us about their own army. So we've got a couple of sources from various different time periods, and we have to work out whether it's telling us something that exists when it was written. So there's a work by, well, people say Aristotle, but then there's the pseudo-Aristotle Athenian Constitution, which gives us information in the 320s, and then it's how far back does that go? So we have Herodotus, who's telling us about the 10 strategoi who have a daily command, and they rotate that daily command. But at the same time, there's a Polemarch, Callimachus at the Battle of Marathon. And we're not sure if that's a transitional system or whether Herodotus has got it wrong, or whether they're drawn by lot or whether they're elected. Later, and it would seem to be reasonably soon after the Battle of Marathon, what you have is the 10 strategoi at Athens are elected from the entire body of citizens, not from the tribe of the individual. So they wouldn't elect their own, or they wouldn't draw lots of their own. They would elect 10 from the entire citizen body, and they'd be assigned different tasks, whether it be guarding the Piraeus or staying at home or going on campaign. So those 10 strategoi, strategos is the individual, they would be the commander of a particular expedition. Below them, you would have 10 taxiarchs. So every Athenian army is designed that they have a list of the men who are eligible, the catalogue of men who are over the age of 18 up to the age of 60, and they basically get assigned to go on a campaign, generally by lot, but there might have been more organisation in terms of how they chose who went on what campaign where. And then from those men, the tribes would elect their taxiarch. So each taxace, so each division within the Athenian army would have 10 taxace. So each tribe, one of the 10 tribes of Athens, would have a taxace each. So there'd be 10 taxace. A taxis is the singular. And that's the interesting thing. So if they have an army of 3,000 men, then they have 10 taxace of approximately 300 men each. If they have an army of 7,000 men, such as the Battle at Delium in 424, where every single Athenian is called up, every man available is sent to the Battle of Delium, there's 7,000 hoplites. So again, you're going to have 10 taxace of 700 men approximately. So there's the taxiarch. Below that, and this is where things get, well, why don't we know anything more? Within each taxis, there are a certain number of lochoi. So you have the lochagos, who's the commander of the lochoi. Now, they don't tell us how many lochoi there are in an Athenian army or within an Athenian taxis. And various different scholars have put forward various different arguments. The biggest confusion, of course, is that in the Spartan army, you start you have two lower divisions. So you have the Lokos. Below the Lokos is the Pentakostes, and below that is the Enomotarch, so the Enomotia. So an Enomotia in the Spartan army has 32 men, or about between 26 and 40, depending on which scholar you're following. The Pentakostes has 128, and the Lokos has 512. Mostly taken from the Battle of Mantinea in 418, because that gives us the information Thucydides does. But his information differs from Xenophon's information, which talks about Mora of 600 men. But that's Spartan, that's not Athenian. So in the Athenian, we end with the Lokos, and we don't know how many Lochoi there were. We don't know if there's any smaller division. No one's ever mentioned as having a smaller command. Some people say there's 100 men per lokos, some people say there's 50, some people say there's more. But I think using the Lysistrata of Aristophanes and several other pieces of evidence, that there's a good reason to think that the lokos at Athens was 30 men. So you've got a couple of mentions of a particular unit at Athens which had 300 men, the Athenian 300. No one's ever heard of them. And that makes a lot of sense. That they fight at the Battle of Plataea. They also fight at the Battle of Oenophita. And it seems that would be make most sense if it was 10 lokoi, one from each tribe, of 30 men each. So you've got 300. That's your unit of 300. So anyway, so if you've got that, you've got the strategos who commands, then the taxiarch who commands a taxace, and there's 10 of those. Below that, there are a certain number of lokoi, and those are commanded by a lokagos. And I'm arguing that there's 30 men per lokos, which means, of course, if you've got 100 men in your taxace, you've got 3 roughly. Now, again, these aren't exact numbers, and we love exact numbers in ancient military history. It's a 19th century hangover where you can break things down exactly, and these are vague. The major point we can point out is the line depth of the Athenian phalanx is generally 8 ranks deep, and that doesn't divide evenly in most of the army numbers that we have. So there's going to be some kind of vagaries in terms of how deep. Of course, the depth is also changed by, at some points it's 10, at some points it's 16, at some points it's 12. And, you know, at Munciaia in 404 and famously at the Battle of Delium, it's 25, 50 shields, and then Leuctra's 50 shields as well. So the depth changes based on terrain, based on the choice of the commander. So that all divides. So there's some odd things going on. Of course, in the demes, there's another one. So Athens has 139 demes. They're divided amongst the 10 tribes. Some demes are very populated, others aren't. So the number of men from each deme is going to change. But it all evens out that you've got whatever army divided into 10 tribal taxace, then that's divided into a certain number of lokoi. And I think that's the Athenian army organization.
Sounds very democratic, almost.
Very, very. Well, they elected their officers by shows of hands. So very democratic. And you think, you know, if they lost a taxiarch or a lokagos on campaign, they would have presumably elected another one immediately rather than have to go through a whole rigmarole. Certainly, if they lose their strategos, they get another one sent out as soon as possible. So very democratic, very flexible.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
See you next week.
Indeed. Bye.